Good morning. I appreciate everybody being here. We're a couple things that we want to accomplish this morning. We want to discuss what the Lubbock Police Department's role is in the investigation of the death of Officer Floyd East, and discuss a couple of new developments, and hopefully dispel some misinformation that's been out and circulating around. But before any of that, I want to take a couple of moments to express condolences on behalf of the Lubbock Police Department, all 440 Lubbock police officers, the near 150 civilian members of our police department, and on behalf of the city of Lubbock, the governing body, the city council, the mayor, the city manager, and the entire city of Lubbock, Texas, our deepest condolences to Officer East's family and to the Texas Tech Police Department as they struggle with something that none of us are ever quite prepared to deal with. I also want to say thank you to Lubbock law enforcement as a whole. One of the things that I've heard a lot of times throughout my career, it's a catchphrase that people say. It's easy to say that, and it's always prefaced with the word "unfortunately." People say, "Unfortunately, it takes a crisis or something like this, or some horrible situation to bring everybody together." And while that may be true in a lot of industries or in a lot of facets of life, for law enforcement, that's not the case. It's because of the strong relationships, the mutual partnerships that we share across jurisdictions, that we're able to rely upon those partnerships during a crisis to mitigate those dangers and to bring swift and quick resolution in these kinds of incidents. And so I want to say thank you to all the agencies that helped out during this circumstance, and I'll mention some of those as we go along. Obviously, some of those folks are here with me that responded the other night, from local to state to county to federal law enforcement agencies. This is a tough week for law enforcement in Lubbock, Texas. I'll go through a little bit of a timeline that I'll discuss, and then we'll have an opportunity for you to ask some of your questions. I know there are a lot of questions, but I do want to preface that I think you understand and you already know that this is a delicate investigation. We're in the very early stages of it still. Investigators have a lot of work still to do, and at some point there will be a trial. There will be a process through the criminal justice system, and we have to be respectful of that. We have to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the investigation and that we maintain respect for Officer East's family as well. So we'll do our very best to answer the questions that you have while keeping those things in mind as we go along, and I try to answer those questions for you. I'll start where the Lubbock Police Department got the call. We'll go through a couple of points there and how we've picked this up, and when we first came in contact with the suspect in this case. On Sunday, the day before the incident that we're all here talking about, which was the 8th, from what we understand, a firearm was stolen from a house out in town, and that wasn't immediately reported to the police. It was reported several hours later, at around midnight, towards 1 o'clock in the morning, leading into Monday, October 9th. Lubbock police officers responded to take that report. While en route to that call, a Lubbock police officer observed a vehicle matching the suspect's vehicle description and pulled that car over. The officers met with the suspect, interviewed him. They requested consent to search his vehicle, and he refused. The initial officer went to the resident, interviewed the people at the residence, took a report for the stolen firearm and also took a report for what's called terroristic threat. Now, there's some misinformation about that. That can become quite confusing when you hear terroristic threat. That's a term that's under Texas law that basically means a very specific threat against a person. I don't want you to take that term and think that it means that there was a threat of some terrorist act or some bombing or something like that. That's not the case, and we need to clear that up, and we need to clarify what that means. I would encourage you to go into the Texas Penal Code and read what the crime of terroristic threat is. It's not what is being circulated around on social media. In this instance, what the allegation was and what the reported crime was very simply that the individual threatened to do very isolated, very specific harm to the reporting party, and it is simply a Class B misdemeanor. Again, it's not this overarching thing that we think of when you hear the word terrorist or terroristic. It's perhaps outdated in the Texas Penal Code, but it remains on the books, and that's what it's titled. So hopefully we can clear that aspect of it up. The officers took that report. When they're interacting with the suspect out in town, they're faced with a circumstance of whether or not to search this vehicle. They asked for consent, and that was refused. They entertained whether or not they had enough to search it without that consent, and they did not. There was not enough probable cause to search it on its own, nor to get a warrant for the vehicle. They thought there might be perhaps even drugs in the vehicle. They looked into whether or not a drug dog was available to come and sniff the vehicle, and there was not one available. They looked at a few avenues. Ultimately, it would have been unconstitutional for the officers to search the vehicle. There was no arrestable charge. There was nothing to hold the individual on at that time, so they released him. I want to be very, very clear on that. There's no criticism to be had of the officers at that time. They wrote their report and went on to the next calls. Later that day, and these are some things we can't get into at this time. Later that day, there were some other reports made through the Texas Tech Police Department, and there were reports made through some of the mechanisms that they have, as well as with the individual's family, as the day passed on October the 9th, on Monday. The Texas Tech Police Department responded to the check welfare call that evening. Officer East and other officers arrested the individual and had him at the Texas Tech Police Department. There's some confusion over whether there was an interrogation going on or anything like that. That's not the case. He was being processed to be booked into the jail. And during that time, Officer East was shot and killed inside the Texas Tech Police Department. We received that call of shots fired within 2 minutes of it occurring. We got that call at I believe 7:46 p.m. We began responding units to the campus and had officers on the campus within 3 minutes at 7:49 p.m. And this is where I want to really begin to talk about how we address these kinds of circumstances. What I saw when I got to the campus is an effort to ensure that the students and the faculty of Texas Tech University were safe. There's a lot of speculation, a lot of things that have circulated across social media, through comments to media websites, and concerns that have been called in from parents, called in from members of the Lubbock community over whether or not the Texas Tech campus is safe. And I want to say emphatically that it is, that we had a remarkable response. The Texas Tech Police Department handles the day-to-day law enforcement operations on Texas Tech campus. Every agency, no matter its size, can reach a certain capacity, a certain limitation. And at that point, they call in for resources from other agencies. We've done that ourselves. We don't have an aircraft. We often rely on the aircraft support from the Department of Public Safety. You saw in Houston, where they were overwhelmed after the Hurricane Harvey events. They called for resources from around the state. It's exactly what's supposed to happen. There, I think, is some misinformation that we're supplanting Texas Tech's operations. That's not the case. We're there to support them, and we do that quite often, as they do us, in many, many circumstances. So when we began to respond to the campus, I want to make very clear that we were able to swarm officers from the Lubbock Police Department, the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office, the Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers, the FBI, I believe it was ATF agent. Law enforcement officers from all over this region began to diverge onto the Texas Tech campus and lock that area down to cast a net from under which the suspect could not escape and could do no further harm. I'll confirm, in fact, that the suspect did try to make it back to his dorm room and was unable to get into his dorm room, was unable to get very far into the dorm. He immediately saw that there was law enforcement there and had to leave again. He was unable to get to his vehicle. Law enforcement officers had the vehicle. We were on top of the vehicle. He was first sighted at 9:08 p.m. and was taken into custody by a Texas Tech police officer at 9:26 p.m. That's a remarkable thing from our standpoint, and from what I could see from what was the command post, where I stood with the sheriff, with Major Snyder with the Texas Rangers, and with the chief of police for the Texas Tech Police Department, working hand in hand. That was remarkable. And everyone in that response did an outstanding job to keep the students and the faculty of the Texas Tech University campus safe. We were able to contain that situation so that he could not get out into the city, could not go mobile. And I'm very proud of that response. Excuse me. From that point, Chief Boniff with the Texas Tech Police Department requested that we pick up the investigation of the homicide of Officer East. And so just as we would do with one of our own officers or any other homicide, we did a homicide call out. And so Lubbock police detectives responded, began to process that scene, aided by members of the Texas Rangers, the Texas Department of Public Safety's laboratory services, also with members of the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office. We also had help from the local FBI office. Where we are today, and again, I'll take some questions and do my best to answer. I won't talk very much about how that ongoing investigation is proceeding, other than to say that we currently, as you already well know, have charged Hollis Alvin James Daniels with capital murder, and then recently yesterday he was charged in federal court and indicted for possession of a stolen firearm. That is a development that's come from yesterday. Where we go from this point is to continue in the investigation. We want to make sure that we cover the remaining parts of the investigation, interview people that still need to be interviewed, wait on lab results that are still pending, a lot of things that remain in the investigation so that we can put together a package for the Lubbock County District Attorney's Office to proceed with their case, and then at the appropriate time for the federal prosecution to occur from there. I think what's the very relevant point right now for Texas Tech Police Department is that they are still faced with the fact that they have to bury one of their own. And that's what they're focused on right now. So I'm very proud of the fact that we can pick up the ball and run with it for them while they focus on what's most important in this circumstance right now. So with that, I'll go ahead and take questions that you have. And again, I do want to give the caveat that there's a lot of things that we're unable to speak about right now, but we will do our best to answer the questions you have.
Can you talk about how the suspect maybe got a gun into the police station, or was he searched before taken into custody? Can you kind of shed some light on that?
I will. Here's what I'll say. unfortunately, he was able to gain access to a weapon, and he shouldn't have been. However, he did. That's being reviewed by the Texas Tech Police Department. That's something that there's two investigations that are ongoing: the criminal investigation that we're conducting and an administrative review that Texas Tech Police Department is doing, and that's really for them to speak about. And I think at the appropriate time they'll have some of those answers for you. I don't want to get too in depth in that. I think that I think suffice to say, it's very clear that if everything always went perfectly, sadly, we wouldn't be good at doing police funerals. Yes, ma'am.
Confirm if he was searched or not, just a yes or no?
He was searched during his time in custody, but again, unfortunately, he was able to gain access to a weapon.
When you were giving the timeline earlier, there was about a 15 to 20 minute gap between when he was first seen and then apprehended. What other buildings on campus did he enter or attempt to enter in that time frame?
None that we're aware of. He did gain access to Talkington Hall, where his room is located. However, law enforcement was already there, and he could see that, and we were able to prevent him from getting too deep inside the building. He immediately exited. Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
say why he wasn't handcuffed? Is that just part of policy when he's in the briefing room?
I'm not going to talk about Texas Tech's policies, let me move away from this incident in particular, because this is something that probably needs to be clarified. We've seen a lot of comments about it, and we've been asked about our policies. So let me just say this: there are times where a suspect in custody may be unhandcuffed for a sundry of reasons, perhaps to sign a document, to go to the bathroom, to make a phone call, things like that. So it's not out of the ordinary. It's not wrong to unhandcuff a person that's in custody, and it's not a sticking point. I think that I can say that to hopefully put to rest some of the large issues that people have with this particular incident, without necessarily making a judgment call on this incident. That's going to be for the Texas Tech Police Department at the appropriate time to answer that question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
At the time of his initial arrest in the dorm, did it seem like he was on any kind of drugs or anything like that?
I can't really speak to that. I don't know that there's necessarily been an evaluation of that at this point. Suffice to say that he was arrested for the possession of drugs and drug paraphernalia.
Is that one of the lab tests we're waiting on?
Not for our investigation.
Okay.
And that is another point to clear up, is that the Lubbock Police Department is investigating the homicide of Officer East, not the arrest of Mr. The suspect in the shooting of Mr. Daniels. Yes, ma'am.
Have you expressed any remorse since Monday night?
We won't talk about his statements or anything about that of that nature at all. Yes, sir.
Can you comment on what his demeanor was when he was arrested? Did he try to run away when he saw the police officer?
He did flee on foot, and he was captured by a Texas Tech police officer.
Can you kind of talk about the tactics used when arriving on campus to search the campus for the suspect? Kind of go more in detail.
So, patrol officers arrived first from both the Lubbock Police Department and the Lubbock County Sheriff's Office. I saw some state troopers arrive as well. We also did a SWAT call out with the Lubbock Police Department. I believe some SWAT officers from the Sheriff's Office also arrived. It was SWAT officers that began some of the very systematic searches of dorms and buildings. We began receiving a lot of calls. They came in that calls such as, hey, a person matching this description is we've seen him here, and then another call, we saw him over here. And as those began to come in, and they were quite far apart, one of the tactics was to develop smaller teams of some LPD, some Texas Tech, some Sheriff's Office, and to send those teams to go and check out those reports. And so that was very effective. Again, a very good, strong working relationship. And I want to also say the communication piece of that through our dispatch, as well as the Texas Tech University Dispatch Center and the county's dispatch center was just remarkable. That's always one of your weakest points, is being able to talk to each other from different agencies, and so that made a big difference. How that came together. We also recognized that air support would be important. I talked with Gary Albus on the phone while I was on the way, and he very quickly got the DPS helicopter from Amarillo started this way. We ultimately captured the suspect before it arrived, but that was another tactic, of course, that we would have needed had we not captured him so quickly. Yes, ma'am.
When he was arrested, was the gun found on his person, or did he try to?
I won't discuss that at this time.
At the last news conference, it was said that his parents had called, or a family member had called, said that Daniel may have a gun, may be suicidal. Who was that call made to, and when?
I don't know that information. Let me get back to you on that. I'm not exactly sure of that. It wasn't made to the Lubbock Police Department. It may have been, I don't know if it was made directly to Texas Tech or if it was made to one of their support systems. But we can find out, and I'll get that information for you. Gabriel?
Have investigators spoken with Mr. Daniels?
We won't discuss whether they have or have not, or whether he made a statement or what the contents were. We'll leave that for court.
When did it come together that the suspect from Sunday was the same suspect from Sunday night? When was that, I guess, acknowledged or discovered?
Well, I don't know the exact point in time, but it...
During the investigation, or during the search for him, before?
I'll tell you, so let me frame that. I think here's the best way to answer that question for you. There's a lot of things in place that I think can raise flags, that there's a concern or there's an issue. And there, if you compare to, a decade ago, is a much slower process, and we were, we in law enforcement or in social services, if you will, are unable, at that, several years ago to piece things together to respond to them. I think today it's a very quick system, but it's not perfect and it's not instantaneous. And so as things began to happen over the course of the last several days, leading up to the death of Officer East, there comes a point where they can't happen that quickly, and things are happening simultaneously. Red flags are going off at almost a simultaneous pace. And so if you were to be able to spread that out, over several days, perhaps, I think you would have been able to see that in real time, but if you compress that, then you can't. But now doing this investigation and looking at it, it's easy to see, but hindsight being 20/20, it makes it easy to see, but in real time, it's more difficult. Hopefully that kind of helps with that answer there.
Follow up on that. The terroristic threat, that charge from Sunday night, did he know the people he was stealing the gun from, or why was he threatening that definition?
Well, I don't know why. I'm not going to speak to his mindset, but there was a pre-existing relationship. They were aware of each other, yes. Let me get about 2 or 3 more questions, and that's
Do
it.
we know how many people were in the Texas Tech police station at the time, including support staff?
I don't know how many. There were others.
Okay.
Just kind of bouncing off of another question, the welfare check, do we know the full circumstances behind the welfare check? Who made that call? Was it his parents that originally made the welfare check call? Or was that the same one that called him to counsel?
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'm sure that some of that's going to come with some confidentiality. But I'm not sure exactly who made that call. Suffice to say, there were a lot of people calling in with concerns. But back to this point, as those compress up, it's hard to start to catch that in such a short amount of time. It's easy now looking back to pick those apart, but as they happen in real time, we're not, I think, in society at a point where we can see it happening in such a short span, unfortunately.
In September of 2016, the suspect was arrested on the Tech campus for, I think it was drug possession, if I remember the Lubbock Police Department ever made aware of that previous arrest, and were you guys involved in that case at all?
I don't know that we were involved in that case, and you know, again, while we have great information sharing, we certainly could have had access to it, but I don't know that we were notified of it for any reason.
And
2 more questions, yes.
And the warrant states that Officer East's body camera was missing. Was it damaged at all by Daniels or anything like that?
No, not going to discuss that at this time.
Okay, and then as for when he was arrested outside near the Coliseum, is that body camera footage that can be released, like him in the back seat?
Still,
of the car?
we're gonna leave that for the investigation. Again, we really want to protect the integrity of this part of it. Go ahead.
So on Sunday, he stole that gun, and then. or
Well,
actually
let's
stole-
just say on Sunday there was a gun stolen.
Gun stolen,
Right.
okay. And then in the arrest warrant, I believe it said that he bought a gun online and was shipped to him.
I have no knowledge of that at all.
Okay.
All right. Yes, ma'am.
Can you confirm whether or not Officer East was dead on the scene after the shot? Was there any attempt to take him to a hospital?
Unfortunately, he was deceased there. Let me two more. You and then you. Go ahead. Yes,
Okay, so
Lucinda.
we've been hearing a lot about law enforcement agencies coming together. What do you have to say about the community response?
It's overwhelming. It's you know, it's not surprising. I was able to stop by well after the vigil on the campus on Tuesday, and I got there probably 7:20. You know, an hour and a half after it started. There were still students there. The one student was still standing up on the on the planter with the blue line flag. I talked to him for a few minutes. We've had just a huge outpouring of support. It's, you know, it's overwhelming, and it's. I've had emails, phone calls, texts. I think, you know, the officers as they go to calls. It's West Texas. I think that's it. But you know, that's nationwide. I think people, by and large, the vast majority of people support law enforcement. They recognize this as a tragedy. Yeah, I'll have a comment on that here in just a second. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any state or federal law enforcement agencies assisting LPD with this investigation?
There are. We use the Department of Public Safety's crime lab. That's the one that we depend upon. The Texas Rangers have offered their support. We you know, immediately Commander Albus sent me a workup on the suspect so that we would have all the intel, all the knowledge that we might need to help in locating him. Again, we work hand in hand, and I'll reiterate the comment I made a minute ago. It's because of the relationship that we enjoy day in and day out in everyday law enforcement in West Texas that we're able to fall back on during these kinds of crises to quickly and effectively bring to bear, you know, what you can only describe as a massive law enforcement presence on this circumstance to quickly get it under control. One agency helping out another, but all working together as one. Let me get one more question, Gabriel.
Can you, I guess, provide some background on Officer East? Where he's from? Does he have family?
That's it. I appreciate you asking that question. We'll close out with that. So he was a guard with Texas Tech Police Department. They have police officers and they have guards. He's from El Paso, is where he actually lives, and Texas Tech has campuses, of course, across the state. And he went to a regional academy, somewhat like we have South Plains or the SPAG Academy here. Different colleges have police academies. He went to a police academy. He graduated from that, became a police officer with the Texas Tech Police Department. He was up here to do his field training and to finish out all of his training to become a Texas Tech police officer, a promotion up from their guard positions. He'd completed that training. He was on his own, working independently as a police officer. And he was soon to transfer back down to El Paso. His family had not relocated up here because he ultimately wanted to remain in El Paso at Texas Tech's El Paso campus, from everything that I understand. So his family still lived down there. He has his wife he's survived by, and his 2 daughters. And he wasn't a what you would think of a typical new police officer who's in their early 20s, mid 20s. He was in his late 40s. From what I understand, it wanted to do this career for a long time, and it finally achieved it. And so I'll close with this. I've hopefully answered a lot of the questions that have been unanswered. I know that some remain unanswered. I know that. And the answers to those questions will come out in due time. Remember, there will be a trial down the road, and hopefully you guys can be patient until we get those questions answered so that we can maintain the integrity of the case for trial. But I think what's important is that we keep the focus on the fact that Officer East was a fine man doing very honorable work, which he died doing. So let's keep that in focus as we report and talk about this incident. So with that, I appreciate you guys coming here. Thank you.